This is a second video on the poem King Porus, A Legend of Old, written by Michael Madhusudan Dutt. In our earlier video, we had discussed the first two stanzas of the poem, and in this video, we'll continue with the rest. So, here in the third stanza, we see that the poet he describes how King Porus fought bravely in the battlefield. But dauntlessly there stood King Porus, towering amidst the foe like a Himalaya peak with its eternal crown of snow. And on his brow did shine the jewelled regal diadem. His milk-white elephant was decked with many a brilliant gem. So, dauntlessly there stood King Porus. So, in the battlefield, King Porus he stood courageously, towering amidst the foe, standing high amidst his enemies, just like a Himalayan peak. So, the poet he uses a simile here. He compares King Porus to the Himalayan mountain, which stands high with its eternal crown of snow. And on his brow did shine the jewelled regal diadem, and on his head it carried a jewelled crown. So he wore a jewelled crown on his head, diadem, regal diadem. It is a jewelled crown which is worn on the head. His milk white elephant was decked with many a brilliant gem, and he rode on his white elephant, and the white elephant it was decorated with many precious gems. He recked not of the phalanx that round him close, but nobly fought, and like the angry winds that blow, and lofty mountain pines lay low, amidst them dreadful havoc wrought, and thinned his crown and country's foe. So he recked not of the phalanx, that is, he did not pay attention to the group of enemy soldiers that had surrounded him. Phalanx means the group of soldiers. So he did not pay attention to his enemy soldiers, but he fought nobly, and like the angry winds that blow, and lofty mountain pines lay low, as the angry winds blow on the mountains and the pines are the trees found on the mountains, and the pine trees lay low. These winds caused harm to the pine trees and thinned his crown and country's foe. So similarly, King Porus he fought against his enemies. The highest warriors at his deeds, awestruck, quailed like wind-shaken reeds. So even the highest warriors on his enemy side, they were awestruck, they were surprised. They were surprised at the bravery of King Porus, and they quailed. They feared like wind-shaken reeds, as the wind shakes the reeds, that is the grass. Similarly, his bravery it shook the warriors, the enemy warriors. They dared not look upon his face, they shrank before his burning gaze. So the enemy soldiers they dared not look upon his face, that is upon King Porus' face, and they shrank before his burning gaze, the look in his eyes. They were feared by the look in his eyes. For in his eye the hero shone, that feared not death, and in his eyes there was no fear of death, but high alone a being as if of lightning made. King Porus, it appeared as if he was made of lightning that could burn all that looked upon him. Scorched means burn. Trampling the living with the dead, that is, destroying the living with the dead. The immortal thunderous sun astonished I, the heroic king. He saw him bravely charge like his dread father, Fulminating though thousands round him closed, he stood as stands the ocean rock. Now, here in the fourth stanza, the poet shows how King Porus was treated after he fought in the battlefield. So, the immortal thunderer's son astonished eyed the heroic king. So, Alexander, with his surprised looks, he was watching King Porus. He looked at the heroic king. Heroic king is King Porus. He saw him bravely charged like his dread father. Fulminating though thousands round him closed. So he fought bravely. Alexander saw Porus fighting all alone bravely, opposing the thousand soldiers, enemy soldiers that were around him. He stood as stands the ocean rock, and although he was surrounded by thousands of enemy soldiers, but he stood still as the rock in the ocean amidst the lashing billow, as the rock in the ocean stands even amidst the striking waves. In the similar manner, King Porus stood in the battlefield surrounded by the thousands of soldiers, unmoved at their fierce thundering shock. But when the Emathian conqueror saw that with gaping wounds he bled, desist, desist, he cried. So when Alexander, Emathian conqueror, that is Alexander, when Alexander saw Porus bleeding, when he saw the open wounds of King Porus, he commanded his soldiers to stop. Desist, desist means to stop. Such noble blood should not be shed. So he cried that such noble blood should not be shed. He asked his soldiers not to attack King Porus. Then a herald was sent. Herald, that is a message. Then a message was sent where bleeding and faint stood amidst the dying and the dead King Porus boldly undismayed. So the message was sent, and King Porus, he stood among the dying and the dead, and he stood boldly and undismayed. That is, without any, without getting worried or without any kind of sadness. He stood boldly there. Hail, brave and warlike prince! Thy generous rival bids thee seize. Behold, there flies the flag that lulls dread war and wakens peace. Hail, brave and warlike prince. Hail means welcome. So he was welcomed, and the generous rival is Alexander here. So he had commanded his soldiers to stop, and then behold means see. So the flag was flying high, that that brought the war to an end, and that wakened the peace. So there was peace between Alexander and King Porus, and Alexander, he became he gave the kingdom of Porus to him. Now, in the fifth stanza, King Porus, he is in front of Alexander. So the poet describes the moment when King Porus, he was in front of Alexander. Like to a lion chained, that though faint bleeding stands in pride, with eyes were unsubdued, yet flesh the fire looks that defied. King Porus boldly went where amidst the gay and glittering crowd sat godlike Alexander. So King Porus, he was brought in front of Alexander, and like to a lion chained, that though faint bleeding stands in pride. So when King Porus, who was chained and who was brought in front of Alexander, still he was bleeding, but he stood in pride, just as the lion. So here he is, again there is a use of a simile. He is compared to a lion here. With eyes were unsubdued, yet flesh the fire looks that defied. So here his eyes and they still defied. They flashed like the fire. There was fire in his eyes, and he defied. King Porus boldly went where amidst the gay and glittering crowd sat godlike Alexander. So boldly King Porus, he uh, he moved towards the gay and glittering crowd, and amidst this gay and glittering cloud sat Alexander, godlike Alexander. And King Porus, he stood boldly before him. While around earth's mightiest monarchs bobbed, King Porus was no slave. He stooped not, bent not there his knee. So when King Porus was brought in front of Alexander, he did not act as a slave. He did not stoop. Stoop means to bend or to bow. So he did not bend his knee, he did not bow, but stood as stand an oak in Himalayan majesty. He stood straight. He did not bow. He stood as an oak tree stands on in the Himalayas. How should I treat thee? Asked the mighty king of Macedon, even as a king replied in royal pride, In's haughty son. So, when King Porus was brought in front of Alexander, then Alexander asked King Porus that how should he be treated. So, mighty king of Macedon is Alexander, even as a king. And what was Porus' reply? Porus replied that he should be treated as a king. In's haughty son. In's haughty means India's pride. King Porus, he was India's pride. The conqueror pleased, him forth released. Thus India's crown was lost and won. So the conqueror was pleased, that is, Alexander was pleased, and he released King Porus, and thus India's crown was lost and won. So, although he was defeated in the battlefield, but he had won the heart of Alexander. Now, in the sixth stanza, the poet describes or talks about the heroism of King Porus, as well as he laments. He laments that the patriotism which was there in King Porus is no more found in his countrymen. So he talks about his time, the poet is talking about his age, and he laments that in his age, uh, his age is lacking the patriotism and heroism that was there in King Porus. But where, oh, where is Porus now? And where the noble hearts that bled for freedom? With the heroic glow in patriot bosoms nourished, hearts eagle like that recked not death. So the poet, he questions, but where, oh, where is Porus now? That is, Porus like kings are no more. And where the noble hearts that bled for freedom? And where are those noble hearts that fought for freedom, that gave the noble hearts gave their life for freedom? With the heroic glow in patriot bosoms nourished. So uh, patriotism could no more be found in the countrymen. Hearts eagle like that reck not death. Where are those hearts which were eagle like, which did not fear death, which did not pay attention to death, but shrank before foul thraldom's breath? But they shrank before the slavery's breath. And where art thou, fair freedom, thou once goddess of sunny clime, when glory's halo round her brow shone radiant, and she rose sublime like her own towering Himalaya to kiss the blue clouds throned on high. Now, again, freedom is personified here, and where are those? So the poet questions, where is that freedom? That freedom which was once the goddess of India, and whose glory surrounded the head, and the head shone radiant, and she was admirable, she was appreciable, and like her own towering Himalaya to kiss the blue lights thrown on high. So that freedom is no more now, and the poet laments it. How like a dream, how like bright sunbeams on a stream that melt beneath great daylight's eye, that glory had now flitted by. So India's glory, it has flitted by, it is now no more, and the glory of India has gone by, and the crown that once did deck thy brow, it's trampled down, it is destroyed, and thou sunk low. Thy pearl, thy diamond, and thy mine of glistening gold no more is thine. So the poet says that India, in the pearls, the diamonds, the mines of gold, now no more belongs to India. The invaders, they have invaded India and they have taken all its riches. Alas, each conquering tyrant's lust has robbed thee of thy very dust. So he feels sad that the cruel rulers, the cruel invaders, they have conquered India and they have robbed his country of everything. They have taken away the pearls, diamonds, mines of gold, everything. Thou stands like a lofty tree, shorn of fruits, blossoms, leaves, and all, of every gale the sport to be, despised and scorned even in thy fall. So the poet, he says that now the country, it stands like a lofty tree, shorn of fruits. Shorn means short of fruits. The fruits, blossom, leaves are missing. It is it is a lofty tree, but short of fruits, blossoms, leaves, and all, and of every gale, that is the strong wind. When the strong wind blows, uh, this, it is despised and scorned even in thy fall. It is hated and disrespected in its fall. So we see that in this poem, or through this poem, the character of two great warriors, that is Alexander and King Porus, is brought forth, and we see that King Porus, he stands for patriotism, and Alexander stands for heroism. So the poem, it glorifies King Porus as a hero of India. So this is a beautiful poem which describes the historical figure, that is Porus.